welcome to everyone. This is the first seminar of a speaker series we want to organize here at Santa Croce, because the speaker series is called Stewards of Providence, making the resources of the church fruitful. So we took this sentence directly from the Catholic social teaching, because we believe that making the church fruitful, it's also a management issue. And we believe that this is so much that we designed a management course here in Santa Croce for priests, lay leaders of the church, in order to understand how to use money, how to use resources, economic resources to make the church fruitful. And this is the first of a series, as I said, and so the goal of this speaker series is to understand through practical examples, through best case studies, how the church can use its resources to accomplish its mission. And the mission, of course, is to evangelize as much as possible, and thanks to God, of course, but the money and resources can be a leverage upon which we can do it better. And of course, in these examples that we will go through the series, we will find inspiration, hopefully, in order to understand how you, in your programs, in your pastoral life, can make the same with your resources. And so because, however, we are aware, I am Roberto Dandi, I'm a business scholar, a management scholar. I come from a business school here in Rome. It's called the Luce University. I recently joined Pontifical Università della Santa Croce as a faculty at the program of church management. And I think that these issues, management issues, are very relevant to the church, but we need to be smart in understanding what management techniques, what management concepts we can apply in the church, because not everything we can translate from management science to the Catholic Church. So we need to understand that what is our mission first, and what is our how we can use management science to accomplish our goals. And Reverend Francis Hoffman here is an example for us, because he will tell us about a very successful organization in the US, an entrepreneurial activity that they have done in the US to reach millions of people for evangelization. And they did it through their resources and through some management techniques that we will talk about with Reverend Francis Hoffman. So, Reverend Hoffman, I give you the floor. This is just a brief introduction. Luca Mongelli is here. He's the director of the program. If you want to say something, or maybe later. And so I give you the floor, Reverend Francis, for your speech, and we will be here to question you about this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, and your English is excellent. So it's an honor for me to address this group of students who already have demonstrated their commitment to the work of the church. And I can see from the group here, you all have a lot of experience already, and I'm sure I could learn a lot from each one of you. So what I offer to you is in a spirit of sharing some things that we've learned. and I will tease out some basic management principles and illustrate that with the case study of relevant radio. So on your screen, you see a representation of our logo, Relevant Radio. People ask, why do you call it relevant? And the reason is because everything is relevant to Jesus, and Jesus is relevant to everyone. The heart over the final T is a reminder that Relevant Radio merged 2 years ago with Immaculate Heart Radio from the West Coast. So we enhanced our logo. It's very simple. It's very clean. Down here, you can see there's a little R there. It means it's a registered trademark. We are frequently having to defend our trademark, especially in cyberspace, where people will use our trademark and put it on their own properties, and we have to defend our trademark. So moving along here, let's see how we get to the next one. There we go. Yep. So here's our topic, management science and the mission of the church. There will be 5 points I'll be going over. First, the mission statement and job descriptions. Then we'll take a case study of relevant radio. I'll briefly explain for you the situation of global media today. We will take a look at the history of relevant radio for the past 19 years. We'll focus on 3 results and then look at what we plan for the future. Then I'll move into a discussion of what I call fundamental principles of management that I've learned from others that we practice here, Management 101. Then we'll take a look at the very foundations of the work we're doing, and if there's time, I'll show you some snapshots. So this is our mission statement, bringing Christ to the world through the media. We just wrote this mission statement this year. We had a mission statement before, but nobody knew it. It was too long. And I was at a conference of the National Religious Broadcasters Conference in Anaheim, California, back in March. And those are mostly evangelicals and Protestants. People like Moody's Bible Institute, Focus on the Family, Billy Graham, good people, but the vast majority are not Catholic. And I attended a conference from a person who runs a Christian music station in Houston, Texas, and it was called the 7 No's of Christian Radio, KNOWS, 7 things you must know. This man had much experience, 40 years of experience. It was an excellent presentation. So the first thing you have to know is your mission statement. It's got to be clear, concise, compelling. Everyone in the organization has to know the mission statement. And when I heard that, I said, oh, you can stop right there. I don't even know what our mission statement is. I know where we can find it. I think I know who wrote it. And then I quizzed people at Relevant Radio. No one in management knew the mission statement. Nobody on our board knew it. So we had everybody participate in redrafting the mission statement. And it's very simple. It's very clear. Bringing Christ to the world through the media. It's broad enough that it allows us to work in all sorts of media, not only AM and FM radio, but also through the internet, mobile applications, video conferencing, satellite, television if we wanted to. But it's narrow enough to keep us on our path. Our job is not to build universities or hospitals or theme parks like Noah's Ark theme park in Tennessee. Our task is to bring Christ to the world through the media. And whenever we have a question about what to do, we always reflect on, is this part of our mission? Now, if I'm going too quickly or you can't understand me, just raise your hand and ask me to slow down. Is it okay so far?
Yes. Okay.
Great. So it's a very simple mission statement. It helps in the management of an organization. Whatever the organization might be. Now, as clear and simple as the mission statement is, I've learned it's very helpful for each manager in an organization to be able to summarize their task in 2 words, in just 2 words. So the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, his job is to drive growth. If an organization is not growing, it's dying. So that's his job, drive growth. The Chief Operating Officer is strategic effectiveness, to make sure the scarce resources we've been given are being used effectively. That requires constant measuring of results based on data, right? Strategic effectiveness. The CFO, that's the Chief Financial Officer, her job is to make sure we stay solvent, that we have more money coming in than going out. And that requires consistent financial reporting on a regular basis. The Chief Programming Officer, CPO, his job is to make sure we've got great programming on air. The Chief Sales Officer, they sell commercials, that brings in revenue that allows us to operate. His job is the gross margin. So in an operation, you can have revenues and then expenses, and the bottom line is called the gross margin. So it's not about how much revenue, it's not how big or small the expenses are, it's what's left over, gross margin. That's also part of strategic effectiveness. The Chief Marketing Officer, CMO, her job is to get listeners. The Chief Communications Officer, her job is to make sure we have the right message. And the Chief Development Officer, her job is to get money. It sounds crude and blunt, but it's very helpful that everyone in the organization know what their job is. That doesn't mean you can't bring them all together on a regular basis to talk about all of the issues as a team, but each person on their team needs to know their role. The exact same thing takes place in football, whether it's American football or European football and soccer. The goalie has to save goals, right? The forward has to make goals. Everyone has to know what their position is. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And so sometimes in meetings, I'll ask people, what's your job? Stay solvent. What's your job? Gross margin. Right? Just real fundamental things. All right, now we're going to take a look at global media in general. Here is a view of planet Earth. It's beautiful from outer space. And Jesus said, go out and make disciples of all nations. There are all the nations, and that's our task. It's universal. Relevant radio is online, on air, on demand. Online means you can get it through the internet. You can get it on air. That's AM stations and FM stations. And you can get it on demand, which means everything that we broadcast becomes a podcast. This is a picture of the world through the links on Facebook. This is the landing page of Mark Zuckerberg. This is several years old. It shows just how connected the world is through Facebook. And you can basically see the white areas is where there is a lot of population. And the blue areas, there's very little population. That's the desert of Nevada. That's the Gulf of Mexico. This is the rainforests of South America. This is sub-Saharan Africa. The only population center that does not show up here is China. China has deliberately kept itself out of that communications grid. They have the internet, but they don't connect to the internet to the outside world. That's the world we live in. We are a connected world. There are 7 billion or more people in the world today. 3 billion of them are connected to the internet. That leads to trillions of interactions yearly. And all of that is involved in information and communication. And when we look at that and know that Jesus says, go out to the whole world, well, we see that it's a big task. The world has changed immensely in the last 12 years. Those two pictures are Via della Conciliazione in the year 2005 when Benedict XVI was elected, and then 8 years later in 2013 when Pope Francis was elected. Those lights you see here, those are not candles. In 2005, there was no smartphone. There were cell phones. And people weren't using tablets like they use today. This is an extraordinary development in human communication, technology, lifestyle, living. It has tremendous ramifications upon all of us. And this is ancient history now. That's 6 years ago. 6 years ago. What has not changed is human behavior. This could be any large city in the world. We've had traffic jams since the time of the founding of Rome in 752 BC. We still have traffic jams in every major city in the country. People travel at set times in the morning and in the evening, on the way to work, on the way back from work. Something that we understand very closely at Relevant Radio because this is our target market. While you're in your car, you really can't do much else except perhaps listen to the radio or talk on the phone. Lots of these people, you watch them in airports, they're on their smartphone. So we need to be there. Again, I'm giving you a brief overview of the reality of media in the world today. Since the year 2003 to 2016, the average time spent per day with the three biggest media sources, radio, TV, and internet, has gone up significantly, almost 25%. Media is everywhere. It's on the gasoline pump at the gas station. It's on the back seat of the taxi that you're taking. It's in the Uber car. It's at the airport. It's in the restaurant. It's the bar. It's at home. It's everywhere. What's fascinating is 100 years ago, in the year 1919, the average time spent with media was less than 1 hour per day because there was no television, radio, satellite, internet. There was only the newspaper. So the world has changed in extraordinary ways in the last 100 years. All right, now moving along from that topic, I just gave you an overview of global media today. Here's the story of Relevant Radio. In the year 2000, the FCC, that's the Federal Communications Commission in Washington, D.C., granted a license to Relevant Radio. We bought WJOK 1050 AM radio in Green Bay. The date of the permission was December 12, 2000. That's why you will often see an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe on our marketing materials. 3 years later, the brand Relevant Radio was launched. We started doing all of our own programming. By 2006, Relevant Radio reached 20 million people, mostly in the Midwest, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, but also in Florida. However, it led to a cash flow crunch. There were 20 stations, but the expenses were much greater than the revenue. This was a moment of crisis at Relevant Radio. And at that point, the decision was made to cut as many expenses as possible so that we could stop the debt crisis. And once we were able to do that, it would take the better part of 10 years to grow out of that situation. So that's a whole story I could talk about some other day. By the year 2010, we still only reached 20 million people, and we had gone through a reorganization. We had sold off 5 stations. Then by 2016, once we were able to break even in the finance of our organization, we were able to triple our size by acquiring stations in large cities. The next year, we doubled our size again by merging and acquiring Immaculate Heart Radio on the West Coast. And the year after that, we were able to expand by 40 million more people. And then we just finished an acquisition from Salem Media, and now we reach 220 million people in the United States. During all of that time, from the year 2000 to 2019, our cost per hour of listening has gone from 98 cents per person per hour to 16 cents per person per hour. That's the nature of broadcasting. The larger you are, the less expensive it is per unit of information that you're delivering. That's the nature of broadcasting in the United States and in other places. Your biggest expense is the programming. Relevant Radio today, we currently have about 750,000 people who listen to us about 5 hours a week. Now we reach 220 million people, and we get about 0.3% of them listen. Now 750,000 is a lot of people, but the reality is our broadcasting is in a hyper niche market. But they listen 5 hours a week. 90% of the listening hours take place in their car. 10% of their listening hours takes place online, on the app, on their desktop, on their tablet, on their laptop, on their smart speaker, indoors. So what we're really going after is this number here, people in their cars. We have 625,000 downloads of our app. So almost everybody who listens to us has downloaded our app. That leads to 2 million monthly sessions with 100,000 active monthly users. These are really good numbers. Very few people involved in Catholic media have, well, how should I put it? We know our numbers are good. They may not sound as big as you might think they should be, but this is the reality. We have 4.5 million followers on Facebook. Most of them are from the Philippines. And we have 3 million people engaged monthly, mostly in our live broadcast of the Mass, which gets broadcast 15 million videos yearly. We wind up broadcasting about 150 million hours yearly. That's one person listening 1 hour at about 16 cents per person per hour. That's relevant radio today, sort of the business aspect of it. What we do is bring hope, because when Christ comes to people, he brings hope. Hope that there is life after death, hope that there is forgiveness for our sins, hope that there is mercy, hope that our wishes can come true. Everybody needs hope. Children need hope. Families need hope. Older people need hope. Christ brings hope, and that's what we do. So we've got some good news to share with you about results of all of this work. We did a listener survey right after Easter this year. We sent it out to 55,000 of our listeners who are donors. We told them that they could finish the survey in 5 minutes. It had 20 questions, very simple questions. And among other things, what we learned, first, we had 10,000 people respond in the first 3 days. That's an immense number of respondents. And since 2 of the questions were open-ended, they could write their own answers. That generated close to 2,000 pages of comments. We had so much information. We said, stop the survey. We already have plenty of information. But among other things, this is what we learned about the effectiveness of our apostolate and evangelization through the radio. We learned that 20% of our listeners claimed that something they heard on air inspired them to come back to Sunday Mass. That's a huge number of people. So first thing we learned is that we have listeners who are not practicing Catholics, and they're not aware that they're not practicing. Something they heard on air reminded them, oh, we go to Mass on Sunday. That's what we should do. But 20% claim something they heard on air brought them back to Mass on Sunday. We're very, very happy with that result. 45% claimed something they heard in our shows inspired them to come back to the sacrament of confession. Isn't that amazing? Sometimes we think people resist it out of reluctance, but many times they resist it because they just don't know how to go or what to do. This is the best number. 84% claimed they pray more now. I don't know if they pray as intently as she does. She's really praying, right? She's really praying. But that's a huge impact. How come they pray more? Because sometimes on air we pray. We get a call from a listener and her husband has cancer and she needs support. So we pray a Hail Mary on the air, something very simple. So it's tremendously effective for evangelization. 355 respondents said they know of a seminarian or a priest or a religious who credits their vocation in part to relevant radio. And here's one of those. He's a priest here in Green Bay. He claims the programs on relevant radio inspired him to consider the priesthood. And there he is in front of one of our banners there. These are the stations we just purchased this year in big cities: San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Tampa, St. Pete, Miami, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Boston, Youngstown, Ohio, St. Louis area, and Denver. Those are all the gold stars. This was 10 cities at once. We got very, very fortunate. All of the other white dots are existing stations. And between all of these, we reach 2/3 of the people in our country, almost all in big cities. Where do we want to get to tomorrow? We want to be all across America. We've launched Relevant Radio in Espanol. It's a very important demographic in the United States. We seek to engage 3 million listeners 5 hours a week, and we hope to bring back 1 million people to Mass. That's the goal. It's going to take a lot of work to get there, a lot of hard work and sacrifice. All right, so that's Relevant Radio, that's global media. Now let's speak about some fundamental lessons we've learned and we employ here at Relevant Radio. And I'm going to give credit to these first 4 points to Professor Harry Kramer. He's an outstanding professor in the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern University. Previously, he had been the chief executive officer and chairman of the board of Baxter Travenol, which is a multinational pharmaceutical corporation located in the Chicago area. He's written several books on management, and I'd encourage you to be familiar with them. He's come and spoken to our board of directors, and he has spoken to our management team, and he's very clear and easy to understand. And so in terms of management, you as a manager, you have people who report to you. 4 points: set very clear expectations, very clear. They should probably be in writing, and you should have a copy and they should have a copy. Your expectations of what they are to do, what their job is. Second, you have to communicate those expectations over and over and over again. Third, then you must measure the results. Are they positive results? Are they negative results? Are they hitting the goal? Are they missing the goal? And finally, fourth, there has to be consequences for those results. Good results get good consequences. Bad results get bad consequences, right? The point here is to have very clear conversation and document these things in writing. We want to help everyone to be successful, but sometimes they're in a position where they don't have the ability or the talent or the energy or the training to be successful in those areas. And so we'll only frustrate them. If a person ever needs to exit a company because they're not performing, it should never be a surprise. right? It should all be documented. There should be a trail of discussion. There should be, hey, we have not been able to get to the goals now 3 months in a row. What do you think is the reason here, right? So this is Management 101. Very simple ideas, very hard to actually carry out because it takes a certain amount of fortitude and fortitude to communicate this way. So set very clear expectations, communicate them over and over again, measure the results, and assign consequences to those results. The next piece of Management 101, I credit to Michael J. Burke, the founder of Tel Labs, a telecommunications corporation located in the Chicago area that revolutionized communications for cell phones around the world. He was the Entrepreneur of the Year. He started out as an electrical engineer, and I've asked him during his lifetime if he had advice for how people can be successful in life. And he said, yes, I've given that talk many times. Three very simple things. First, tell the truth. Second, try your best. Third, do the right thing. They're very general, aren't they? But the most important one and the hardest one of all is to tell the truth. Because if we don't tell the truth to people, we deceive ourselves and we deceive others. Sooner or later, they will figure it out that we have not been telling the truth. Then they will not trust us. If people do not trust you, they will not cooperate. If they do not cooperate, there will be no enthusiasm. If there's no enthusiasm, there will be no growth. So it's something very, very fundamental in any kind of human organization. That's absolutely fundamental to tell the truth. Otherwise, you lose people's trust, and then there's no cooperation. You can't have teamwork. It's like playing soccer against 12 people on the other team, and you're the only person on the team because people won't work with you. So those are some basic points about management. Then move on here. That's Relevant Radio. You can listen online at relevantradio.com on the free mobile app on your smart speaker. And then this is what keeps us going. This is right to the left of me. We have a chapel here where we have adoration of the Blessed Sacrament every day, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. We have Mass every day. The Eucharist is the root and center of absolutely everything we do here. So it's important for me to show you that. Here's a picture of some of our young listeners from the University of Wisconsin who came out this year for a Marian pilgrimage. There is a picture of a lot of high school girls in New Jersey where we did a live broadcast of our show. This is a picture of thousands of young people walking on a pilgrimage, and they learned about the pilgrimage on Relevant Radio. This is kind of the face of Central and Mid-America in early May. Very, very relevant. And that was the end of the 21-mile walk to Mary. And that's the end of my class for today. I would be happy to take any questions. I can stay with you for another 20 minutes or so, but I'd be happy to entertain and answer any questions you might have.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. And actually, the results of what we have done is impressive. And so I want to ask you a couple of questions. The first is a bit more strategic question. The second would be a provocative question. So feel free to answer whatever you want. So first of all, I know that Relevant Radio with your management style, with your leadership style, actually have done this sort of turnaround, a strategic turnaround. So the first question is, what are the main obstacles, reaction, opposition to the change? Why, I mean, I think that you encounter some sort of challenges in promoting this change. So why do you think that this counter-reaction happens? And how do you deal with this kind of situation? Then I will ask you the second question.
Good. No, that's an excellent question. And you get really to the heart of the issue. back in 2009, the board of directors was seriously considering the closing down Relevant Radio and selling off the assets and going into bankruptcy. That was a very serious consideration. It was a valid consideration. It was, these were very successful businessmen, people of high integrity. And I was invited to join the organization, and I did it on the condition that we would make our very best effort to keep it alive. And to keep something alive, which is highly in debt, all you need is time. You need God's grace, but you need time. And so effectively, we worked a out-of-court bankruptcy with our creditors. And we told them, we will give you the money we owe you. We will give you the interest rate you want if you give us the time we need. So there are three factors with respect to debt. The principal, that's the amount you owe. The interest, that's the time value of the money. And then the time it takes to pay it off. I was convinced that if we could get to break even on operations, then over time we could pay off our debt. And the board agreed, our creditors agreed, because everybody wanted this to work, right? There was they didn't see this as a business. They saw this as a mission of responding to Christ, evangelize. So ultimately what drove it forward is the love for Christ and love for souls. Knowing that it can work because others have made it work in other situations. So they were hard conversations. We literally did need miracles. We went to the oratory shrine of St. Joseph in Montreal and prayed for miracles specifically. We needed a very large gift to be able to buy us time. And we got that large gift. And then it allowed us to buy time. When we started, we sent a letter to all of our listeners and donors explaining just how bad the situation was, knowing that you can only do that once. You know, you have to be completely honest and forthright. And then we tried to implement real credibility in the organization with our listeners and donors. And we invited donors to support us for one day of the year. We took our operating expenses, divided them by 365 days of the year, and one day of operations was $24,983.72. An unusual number, but a real number. And we asked people if they could give us that amount of money. There are a number of people who could do that, but we made our donors part of the process, giving them that transparency. So, yeah, there were all sorts of obstacles. But there was no obstacle within the organization. Our people were willing to take cuts in their pay and benefits with the hope that they'd make it back, and they've more than made it back. And now they're well compensated, and we are able to contribute to the retirement plans and all that. But it was really a team effort. People wanted to make it happen. They were willing to make the sacrifices. They were willing to work. And it was a very exciting time and very spiritual time. A lot of hours on our knees. The very first thing we did was we tried to improve the chapel we have. Where there was no marble there was no gold mosaic. We put that in. We figured if we take care of the Lord first, he's going to find us the grace we need to get to where we need to go. So, yeah, that's a key question. You know, we didn't give up. That's all there's to. We just did not give up. Your second question then, which is be more provocative.
Yeah. I mean, based on what we study on church management until now, we are discussing the role of the priest in the governance rather than the management. So it's actually the priesthood, there is this Pia Munera, the Munus Regendi, which is supposed to execute some sort of governance, but not necessarily a direct management. So the provocative question is this. I mean, your position was a bit unusual because as a priest, you was going to be the leader of this change, this yoke, right? So is that coherent with your priesthood, that the position that you are running now, that you have run in the past? And do you think that can be some sort of clericalism on priests managing directly organizations? I mean, this is a provocative question, so
Sure.
just
No, it's a,
true, but maybe there are some contingencies why something goes well, something doesn't work well.
right. It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. I'm a priest. I'm a priest of Opus Dei. I'm imbued with the pastoral sensitivity of Saint Josemaria to the degree that a priest should always be approachable. A priest should be someone that people want to approach for confession. So if he's mean or not generous or angry, nobody wants to get near him, right? Same thing in management. It is true, the priests share in the triple munera of Jesus Christ to teach, to rule, to sanctify. But the lay people also share in those roles according to their circumstances, like a father in a family or a mother in a family. So there's certain things a priest can bring to an organization that's involved in evangelization that would warrant his position as the leader, just as in a parish. Our mission is to bring Christ to the world through the media, so it is about teaching and evangelization and prayer. And a priest who has good doctrinal formation is capable of giving direction to everybody in the organization about what works and what doesn't work on air. That can simplify matters greatly. That's one of the roles of the priests and the bishops in the church. I also understood from the beginning there were certain areas I would not get involved in because I didn't have the time or the expertise. For instance, I did not get involved in the techniques of producing sound on air. I've never got involved in anything dealing with telecommunications, the internet, IT technology, AM and FM radio, which is an immense part of it. My specialty more was on the finance and accounting part of it because I worked for a certified public accounting firm, and to really understand the income and the expenses, and also to always be positive, right? So CEO means Chief Executive Officer. I sometimes means it's Chief Encouragement Officer, because people can focus on problems and negativity, and then they get discouraged, and they say, we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it. A leader has to listen, they have to be prudent, but they also have to have that courage to move forward and move people forward. And if his decisions are correct 51% of the time, he's a winner. They're not always going to be correct, right? And he needs to receive feedback from his board members and also from his team members. It's also important to understand in leading an organization that if the people who work with you are not enthused about what they're doing, they're not going to cooperate. You need their input. They have to feel a sense of ownership for their area, and they need to be rewarded, especially in the creative side. We have a lot of creatives here in graphic arts and design, on-air, music, all the rest. Creatives need to be given space. So we give them general criteria, 3 guiding principles. Everything is, we're united to the bishops and the Pope, we're under the protection of Our Lady, and we teach the Catholic faith. Very broad, but very specific. And give them that opportunity to have a lot of freedom to work in that. So for instance, we do not vet, V-E-T, topics or guests. That's up to the show host and his producer to determine what is the topic and who is the guest. That allows us to respond immediately to news as it's breaking. And it's very important to have that. So that's a good question. I don't think every priest is called to do these sorts of things. You know, it all depends on what's on their heart, I suppose. There are many, many different ways to serve in the church. Everybody wants to be involved. Everybody wants to be empowered, but relatively few people actually want to make decisions because they have to take responsibility for those decisions. And it's not a job you would do forever because it can exhaust you because sooner or later you're going to make some bad decisions, right? It comes back. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, actually, it's a wonderful answer. Maybe it's also a matter of competencies, right?
I think so.
You have the background for doing that. So actually, I will leave the floor to the participants. So I encourage some participants to ask some question and curiosity that you have in mind.
No, fai fare a Viviana, Luca, scusa il microfono.
Sì, sì.
Grazie.
I would like to know if it's possible, how has been the relation maybe with the bishops and also, you know, because I see you started and from, well, so soon you achieved 200 million of listeners, but then now is 220 and you have hundreds of, no, so 170 stations. So how has been developed this? Has the Church of the United States took also maybe a little bit the leadership of the focus, or you are 100% free in the sense, no, the good sense?
Very good question. So we have three guiding principles at Relevant Radio. The first is we are faithful to the magisterium and the catechism of the Catholic Church. The second is we are united to the bishops. And third is we are under the protection of the Blessed Mother. In terms of unity with the bishops, we ask them for their input when we are going to begin a station in their area. On our board of directors, we have three bishops. We have the Archbishop of Los Angeles, who's now the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. We have Archbishop Hebda, who is the Archbishop of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And we have Bishop David Ricken on our board. Even though they're bishops, they are equal board members with everyone else, but everybody else on our board pays very close attention when they speak, which they do rarely. They're very happy to give guidance when it's necessary, and their position on the board gives us confidence that we're moving in the right direction. So in each market, we give the bishop 1 or 2 hours of free airtime every Saturday morning for the programs that they produce. We provide the bishop a minute each hour for local commercials. We allow ourselves to co-promote any activities that are held on church property. Because if it's held on church property, our sense is, well, the bishop approved it and we can promote that. Retreats, speakers, pilgrimages, things of that sort. I think the bishops are very grateful that we can do this work and it doesn't cost them any money. Some have financially supported us, but we're supported by our listeners. And you know, this again goes back to the sense of St. Josemaria being here to serve in the church. We're blessed with the fact that being a not-for-profit corporation in the United States, it's called a 501c3 corporation, tax-exempt corporation, that we can react to things immediately. So here's a great case in point. Back in July, politicians in the state of California wanted to force priests to divulge what they heard in confession. They wanted to break the seal of confession. This was a very, very serious threat for religious freedom. On Thursday, I received a phone call from the chancellor of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles asking, is there anything that Relevant Radio can do to make our audience aware of this threat? I said, yes. And we took our 6 minutes of commercials each hour and replaced them with announcements about this. We sent targeted emails to all of those listeners in California. And by Tuesday, 250,000 people in the state of California had contacted their politicians and legislators to voice their disapproval, and the bill was dropped. You can't do that with a podcast. You can't do that with television, but you can do it if you own all the stations and you can control the programming. So they were thrilled. The bishops were thrilled, and we'll frequently have bishops on the air during the day. They get on the phone and they're on the air and it goes across the nation. So that's how we do it. That's a great question.
Vidi, se lui lo fai alzare per favore, se no non lo vede. Grazie.
Reverend Francis, good evening.
Thank you.
The question is, during the height of sexual accusation against the clergy in the U.S.,
Right.
the role of the Relevant Radio?
That's an excellent question. All right, so June of 2018, it was revealed that the former Cardinal McCarrick was guilty of crimes. August of 2018, Archbishop Vigano came out with his public statement. These were huge stories in the church. I am blessed that at Relevant Radio, there are 5 members of the board of directors who serve on the executive committee. And we've never met so frequently as we did in those months from June till last February to make sure we got the message on air correct. We were blessed with the guidance, particularly of Archbishop Bernard Hebda of Minnesota. We said we cannot ignore the story because it's very important, but we also said, do not speculate, stick to the facts. We are not investigative reporters at Relevant Radio. Many other Catholic news services are. We are not. We will comment on the news, but we are going to deliberately try to give people something that can help them specifically in their faith life, in their family life, in the management of their money, and in their health. And in these other situations, we'll report what the news is. We'll ask for prayers. And whoever the Pope is, we love him. We pray for him. We're united to him. And if people at any time are confused about what the church teaches, we help the Holy Father by teaching what the church teaches. So that was, we deliberately set our editorial style to give people hope, but also speak about the facts and not give into speculation. Is that helpful?
Yes, yes.
Those are great questions.
Father, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Very open and very transparent. I would take off from the question that Luca was asking, which you responded to very well. But it might be a little personal in the sense you are a priest, but you are also a CEO, a manager. How do you balance both these roles? In the sense, there would be times where you have to take decisions as a manager when it comes to maybe firing an employee or pulling up a person who is not doing, as you mentioned, setting targets, but that person is not achieving the target. Or when you are dealing with banks, probably, or advertisements, anything where you have to negotiate, but that would be more in secular terms. But then you also have the priestly character. How do you balance both in terms of mercy, having mercy, as well as managing the commercial aspect? Thank you.
Excellent question. And I wrestle with it, I pray with it. whenever there's an important decision to be made at Relevant Radio that I have the authority to make, I always make sure I get the input of several other people. Right? There have been times when people on my executive committee did not want to do something, and I really wanted to do it, but I didn't do it because I need their cooperation. Right? So just because you're CEO doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. You have to work as a team with a team. All right. So maybe I'm out there negotiating, but it's always subject to discussion and approval. I have limits of what I can do at Relevant Radio. Any check here, which is for a certain amount, has to have 2 signatures on it. Any budget item over a certain threshold has to have the approval of the board of directors. You lead, but you're not the owner. So, and then the question of mercy, that's very important, and charity is very important, and that is aligned to the task of being truthful. Remember I said, if a person needs to exit the organization or they're getting fired, it should never come as a surprise, right? In those times when we have had to let people go, we've tried to be extraordinarily generous in the severance package. Even though the law might say we only need to give them 1 month of severance pay, we may provide up to 6 months to make sure they're covered and give them assistance in getting replaced somewhere else. To the degree that I do not have to be involved in that, all the better. That's why we have all of these managers who make those decisions. So yeah, I would say, you know, if you have to do that, you've got to do that, but you try to do it in a way which provides people a soft landing. And that's always worked well for us because, you know, you'll meet them down the line. Is that helpful to you?
Okay, so Reverend Francis, thank you very much. I want just to summarize what we have learned. And I think that you mentioned many topics that I, as a management scholar, read every day in the articles, like exploiting economies of scales, managing mergers, using KPI, and working against the competition, because you mentioned that the competition is not just the radios, but also the attention to internet and other communication device. So, and also you mentioned that you use a lot the participative leadership. So really everything that we can read in management books, but also you mentioned that there are some specific topics that are relevant to your organization and to the church, I think. One of that is that you mentioned the donors, they were committed to the radio to save it, and this is something that we cannot find very often in the business world. So the stakeholders,
that's right,
internal stakeholders, are very committed to this cause. And also on the reverse side, you as a CEO and your top management, you are very committed to go the extra mile for your human resources, even if this is not required, and this is something that we can find as well in the church. So do you agree that there is this balance to have in using management science? And if you want to conclude with another example on how the specificity of the church organization like you can use the management science.
You were very, very perceptive.
Okay, so I thank you a lot for your speech. I thank God for this contact with you. I will invite you also for the next seminars if you want to listen to them. We will record them and we will send you the recordings if you want. And so this is the first seminar of a series. I hope everyone here will come again to the next appointments, and thank you again.
See you in February.
See you on February here. Right?
See you in February. Thank you. Very happy to be with all of you.
Bye.
Thank
God
you.
bless you. You're welcome.